Planning Board is now in session. Good evening, everyone. First item on the agenda is a continued public hearing, 154, 156 Northborough Road, major site plan approval and special permit for the lower impact development. This public hearing has been continued from June 4th, July 23rd, July 30th, September 17th, October 15th. I'll ask the town planner to give us an update on where we've come from our last meeting. Karina.
All right. Hi, everybody. The last meeting of the planning board was held on October 15th, at which time an extension request was signed by the applicant's representative or the applicant to extend, to continue to tonight. Following that meeting, Stamsky and McNary, the applicant's engineer, made a submission of revised plans to address comments that were received by Fuss and O'Neill from the prior submission. Let's see here. The revised plans were distributed to the town departments and to the planning board for review. We received one letter back from Open Space Preservation Commission with their comments dated October 25th, which I think the applicant received and worked with Open Space to come to some terms. We received Fuss and O'Neill's final review comments this evening, or this afternoon, I should say, midday, not this evening, which was forwarded to the applicant and his attorney and his engineering team. In the interim, I prepared draft decisions for both the special permit lid and the major site plan approval, which were reviewed by the applicant, Mr. Aho, and his attorney, Mark Bobrowski, who couldn't be here this evening. He indicated he had another meeting, but he sent
his associate, Chris Alford.
Chris Alford, okay, thanks. Once I received comments back from the applicant's team on the decisions and the conditions, I forwarded them to town council on last Friday morning. So we usually need about 7 days to get that back. It's the standard procedure. So when we get that back, we'll finalize based on the other comments tonight. And also on Friday, we received an updated set, an electronic file of an updated planting set, which basically added some notes to reflect language that had been worked out with the Open Space Commission, and I had suggested that they put it on the plan, which was one of the conditions as well. So we have that. It's not formally submitted in multiple copies, but reflects the open space language. And that brings us to this evening. So we have in your packets 2 draft decisions for major site plan and lid. We have the updated landscaping plans, which I can project on the screen if you want to look at them. And that's it.
Very good, thank you. So, counsel, your last name again?
Alphen, A-L-P-H-E-N.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So at our last meeting, we asked the town planner to draft the decision documents and then distribute them to you for review, distribute them to the board. And have you looked at them? Do you have let's start with that. Any comments relative to the draft decision language?
We have reviewed the draft decision and we're happy with the draft decision language. It works for us.
We did give some comments.
We did give some comments that have been, I think, weren't supplemented into the latest draft that I received. Yeah.
Yes, and then I responded with some blue highlighted text to clarify some landscaping for the rain gardens.
Right.
And some other minor changes that were some oversights.
So that's the version, yep.
Yep. It's the version dated October 26th, 2018, which has yellow and blue highlighting.
So they're both dated that, right?
Yes.
So is it the one with the yellow on number 2? Is that the one I should be looking at, or the other one?
Well, one is for,
Major site.
Oh, okay.
and
One
that's
is
the lower
lid.
impact. They look the same, but text is different.
The yellow is some reminders that I still have to update, like the
Right.
dates and such, and
Understood.
a paragraph I had missed when I sent it to you, so you knew what I was doing. And then I responded with some more updates in blue.
So, and then we got the letter from Fuss and O'Neill, and they only list the 3 remaining items. Number 11, which, it has to do with the 50-foot buffer. Number 79, which has to do with the location of the rain gardens. And number 81, which has to do with the septic system. In all 3, they're saying that they don't have a problem with it, but it's up to the planning board to, and the other boards to take it from there. So I think from our point of view, those items are resolved. I don't remember, but was number 81 the last one, or were there more? That's a lot of comments. But the fact that we got through them all is good.
A
Took
lot
some
of hard
time.
work by the board and the applicant, so we appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a lot more work than usual, but we're at that point now so that we can keep it moving. So I'll open it up to the, did you want to present or say anything?
I think we can just respond to any questions or comments you might have. The applicant's engineer is also here, so if there's any comments or any additional things that we can address, we're here to address them.
Okay. So if we get through the comments tonight and there's no more homework, then it would seem to me that we would, I think you indicated the town council is still looking at these. So we'd put this action on our next agenda, hopefully, with a clean set of decision documents, and it would just go to the vote.
Yeah.
Mr. Mills?
I thought we were doing that tonight.
Thank you. And thanks for the update, Karina. Having looked through the material and everything that's, as Chairman said, the partnership that we've gone through, both with us and with Open Space and the other committees, I don't have any further questions at this time.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Jenks?
Good evening. This is the first time I have noticed that there's a title for this. It's construction garages. Is that? There's nothing formal about that, is there?
We've been calling them contractor bays.
I'm sorry. Well, this one says construction garages. It's a Fuss and O'Neill. And the contractor bay was the one I meant to point out. That just got by me, I guess.
That was how it was referred to back in 2010.
Oh,
In
good.
those decisions, it was garages.
Oh,
So
well,
there's both.
I wasn't here in 2010, so.
Well-
But that doesn't imply any restriction on the use. Is that correct?
I don't think it would.
If
think- yeah.
I would say that the uses are going to be regulated by the special permit that was issued. And so the zoning board of appeals decision about what uses can be used is going to really regulate what uses can be used on the property.
Okay, because I'd hate to have the title somebody put on a document.
Yeah, I don't know if we
restrict
can
what you do or-
clarify that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
All right, then, the landscaping, unique for this project, is there any time limit on any of the conditions for the landscaping? Now, I assume you presume the building will still be there in 100 years? Is there a process to change the requirements for this landscaping if it no longer should apply, or?
I think the decision will always apply. It will run with the land. So any conditions as far as maintaining the landscaping will always have to, the applicant or the owner of the property, rather, is always going to have to abide by whatever landscaping conditions there are. So that will be forever, yeah.
I would just suggest then, if you haven't, that you review these in that context also.
Well, there are
Excuse-
specific
Excuse me,
timeframes.
Phil, town planner and I were discussing that, the point that you're focusing on, and it would seem that there's always the option to come in and ask for a modification to the approved subdivision. So, if after a reasonable amount of time, several years at least, we found that the conditions were a great burden, or they just weren't working for the plants, then by us saying this tonight, this will be on the record for this public hearing, that this board is reminding you that you can always come in and request a modification to the approved site plan. And if it makes sense for the site, makes sense for you and the environment, then it shouldn't be a big deal. And the same thing goes with other things. You know, one of the conditions has to do with the lighting, and for all site plans, we reserve there's a condition that allows the board and you to come in and modify the lighting after 4 seasons to see if it's too much or it's not enough. We've had some adjustments over the years. So by us saying this tonight, it's on the record that a modification to an approved subdivision is one of the flexibilities, one of the things that you can do to make adjustments as we go out in the years. Mr. Jenks.
Thank you.
I think that's all for me.
Mr. Stein.
No questions, Mr. Chairman?
Mrs. Luttrell.
I'm going to go back to the landscaping. I liked the original condition that that the landscaping shall be maintained, repaired, or replaced by the owner as needed to maintain compliance throughout the life of the contractor base. The reason being that we're giving a waiver for a 50-foot buffer. I think that's fair mitigation. There was other zoning relief given, and I think having that landscape maintained on that site is not too much to ask. And as the chairman said, if that's too onerous, you can come back and have a discussion. But that's all I have.
Thank you.
Open it up to any public officials. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. Freddie Gillespie, Chair of the Open Space Preservation Commission, and we did comment on this, and we have been working cooperatively with Joel and his team, and we are very appreciative of the collaboration and and very proud of the plan they have come up with for any role we had in helping to achieve that. This is cutting edge. It is unique, and we hope to be standard in the future, but whenever it's the first time, it presents challenges in how to implement. So I just wanted to remind, I may not have been clear on this to Joel and his team, but the Open Space Preservation Commission is advisory only. We looked at this with a narrow viewpoint from our native plant, native pollinator, open space perspective. So when I see this and see what was taken out based on our comments, which were based on establishing this amazing, incredible landscape that you have proposed, the establishment of it, which is different than any other ground cover landscape that has been required on a project like this, that we wanted to be sure there was ability for some changes to be made, so it worked with you so that we weren't saying, you know, you have to do this forever and ever if it's not working. But we didn't mean to say that other requirements of the planning board shouldn't be met in there. We weren't looking at it from a zoning perspective as far as waivers and other zoning relief and the zoning bylaw for landscaping. We were looking at it specific for establishing this ground cover. So my intention with the conditions we've recommended, we have no authority, we're just advisory, and it was not to replace anything that the planning board had thought to require, such as the landscape be there in perpetuity for the use of the building. That was not our intention. However, we wanted to make it flexible enough that if the specific planting, like we had said originally, we're not landscape architects. I can't guarantee these are the perfect plants for that situation and those unique challenges of, I think it's 15 feet from off the road, what will really survive or not. We just wanted to make sure that it was feasible, that the plants were available to help with that, because it is a newer concept. So I wanted to do two things. One, thank Joel and his team, because this was really incredible. And two, say that we weren't expecting this to be all and get rid of other stuff. It was in addition to or just for the establishment of the plants, however the board saw fit, because you're the ones writing the decision. Thank you.
Mrs. Luttrell, can you go back to the language that you prefer? Can you, and point to the language that's in here now that you don't like? We're on the draft lower impact development decision, right?
Correct.
Condition number 4.
Condition number 2. Landscaping shall be in conformance.
So that's on page 5 of 7,
That's correct.
number 2.
In the lid?
Yeah, it's the same condition on 2 decisions, so it's the same language in both,
It's just you're looking at the lid.
yeah.
So what words do you want changed in number 2?
Right before the yellow starts, replaced by owner as. In the original decision, it said, needed to maintain compliance with such plans throughout the life of the contractor Bay's building.
And that got changed to what's in the yellow and blue.
Correct. Which refers to the recommendations of the Open Space Preservation Commission, and as the chair just said, she was giving recommendations on how to establish the plantings and not for the ongoing maintenance of them. And I think some of these are the stormwater. I think they need to keep on going for the life of the buildings. That has to work, those rain gardens.
Yeah, I happen to agree, and I think it's consistent with what we said earlier, that if we go back to that original condition, which is, as long as those bays exist, you have to do this. But again, if after a reasonable amount of time goes by and we realize that that condition doesn't work, then we'd invite you to come back and we can make adjustments. So if it's all right with you, we'll put the old language back in.
Yeah, that's fine. I think the old language, the way that it's written, that's what is implied. So, yeah, that's totally fine, yeah.
Let me ask the rest of the board.
Comfortable with that?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else as far as adjustments? Anyone, any other public officials? We have a selectman in with us tonight.
Would we be striking the two-colored and just putting the original language back?
Right, we'll strike the yellow and the blue, those words in yellow and blue on number 2,
Yep,
and put the old text back in.
yep. And then do the same for condition 4 on the second decision?
On the major site plan?
Yeah.
On the major site plan, it's condition 4.
So is everyone else comfortable with all the rest of the language in these decisions? So I think if we're at this point and there's no more comments, it would make sense to keep the public hearing open so that we can accept comments from town council and you based on council's comments, if any. And then at our next meeting, the hearing would be continued to that. If everything's fine, we'd close the public hearing and take the vote.
Is there anything that, I look at this decision, I don't see anything that town council is going to say that's going to require us to open a public hearing. It would be our position, obviously, to close the public hearing tonight, vote, and it be conditioned, of course, on town council's review. And there can be minor changes to the decision as long as it doesn't change the substance of the decision. If town council wants to change something for legal purposes or something like that. But I don't see anything that legal counsel is going to say, we need to go and open up a public hearing again about this. That's just my position, but I can understand if the board feels otherwise.
If you're as good at predicting the future and the actions of town council, I'll invite you to come to the racetrack with me and we can make some money. I'll ask the board how they feel relative to your comments and closing it up tonight and voting tonight,
Yep.
or to move it to 3 weeks from tonight. Mr. Mills?
I completely understand your idea. And while I'm completely ready to vote tonight, I do think for your own benefit, because if he does come back with something, then we have to post as, open up a new one and everything else. It's just, that might be a slim chance, but it's a risk you guys are taking, and I don't think we want to jump through all those hoops, but I'll let the lawyer talk. Phil, it's up to you.
Mr. Jenks?
I think leaving it open leaves more flexibility, and would prefer that. I can't tell you I have a strong feeling one way or the other. I can understand your interest in getting the public hearing closed, but I would go for the increased flexibility of leaving it open.
Mr. Stein?
I think that we've covered our bases in this process, and I support the proponent's position of closing the public hearing and voting tonight. I agree that it's very, very unlikely that town council is going to have any recommended changes that would require opening the public hearing again.
Mrs. Luttrell?
So when we close the public hearing where you can't accept any more information, correct? So does that include comments from town council?
I think it would depend on the nature, as council said, the nature of the comments, if they were technical and related to the project size or, dimensions or something like that, then we couldn't accept those. But if they're legal relative to some words that doesn't really change the site plan, then we probably can accept. And we have in the past with decisions where the language has been changed between council after the public hearing was closed. But if I remember right, those were site plans that had a lot more disagreement or challenges, whereas with this site plan, we've worked it right. It's a very simple project, and we've worked it down to the final details. So I don't know if I answered your question. I think, again, council's predicting that town council comments will be okay after we close the public hearing.
Well, I guess if I could just jump in too, I mean, we went to the Conservation Commission, I think, last week, and I thought it was kind of just a formality there, and they didn't have the decision written up, so we had to go to the next one anyway. And so I thought tonight we're coming and we'd kind of work through stuff and we're just going to close it out. And it's like, I mean, at some point, it's just like, when is this ever going to end?
Well, I think if we were to continue it, it would be 3 weeks,
November 19th.
November 19th. And then I'm just thinking timing of when the decision will be filed with the town clerk's office. It would-
This decision is much further along.
Yeah,
It's 9 pages, but it's much further along than most decisions are at the point of the vote.
mhm.
So certainly by the 19th, we would have the final language, all the typos, all the
Right.
colors, and I would sign the decision that night.
Yep.
It would go to the town clerk the next morning.
I think it's totally to the discretion of the board, and, but, I think we would prefer to close tonight, and again, it's typical of boards not to have written decisions until after decision is made, and I don't see any reason town council will ask for any more information, that a public hearing will be required, but at the same time, we understand if the board decides that they want to keep it open.
Mr. Jenks?
I guess the real risk is that there is a need to have public discussion, and then we've got to go through the procedure of posting and all, and that's, the risk, that timing risk is yours.
Yep.
So I'm fine with whatever they want to do, but
Did we finish with you, Mrs. Luttrell?
I think we should close.
No, but I think I would feel more comfortable leaving it open and would cover all bases.
The Conservation meets on November 15th, we meet on the 19th. So,
Yeah, but that's until I get hit by a bus next
Yes.
week.
Just one, I think that Conservation is waiting for us, so could we give them a heads up that the next meeting, that we
I don't,
anticipate just signing off?
I don't know that, I wasn't under the impression Conservation was waiting for you. I was under the impression they were all done, but they didn't have, like, we have a decision all written up. They hadn't had that written up. That was,
Oh,
that was
I thought
my,
they
I
were.
mean, unless I missed something.
I thought-
Because they had said I wanted them to vote, and they said even if we vote tonight, we won't have the decision ready, so you're gonna have to, like, the decision's gonna have to be signed, I guess, at the next meeting anyway. Maybe I missed something, but that was
Well,
my
no,
impression.
if the decision hasn't been written, then what are they voting on?
Yeah, that's probably what it was.
So their vote is based on something that's on the table, written,
Yeah.
with conditions and the
So
record.
that's what it was, and so that I was like, well, what the heck was I here for? I thought we were coming to vote, and there was nothing, we couldn't have voted if we wanted to anyway, so it was kind of frustrating.
It looks like the board, I think you did a good job of opening up our eyes to your position on this, but it just seems to me that the way to go is to be conservative and have a very quick agenda item on the 19th.
Okay.
So I don't need anybody here except for me, right? So, I mean, because
Well,
it's
I'm
more
sure
money, it's more money, I mean,
Well,
it's,
I think what he's asking is that if town council has significant comments, we would hope that we would get those comments before the meeting so that we have an opportunity to look to see how serious conversations are going to happen at the next public hearing. Does that make sense to the town and to the board?
It could also be that if the comments from town council are purely legal or language, you two could work it out prior to the meeting
Right,
and have agreed text on the table for us to vote on.
right.
That's
what I-
really what we would expect.
That's what we would expect as well, so we hope to hear from town council soon. We know how those lawyers are sometimes busy, so we hope to hear from them as soon as we can.
well, if it's not ready next meeting, then I'm throwing up my hands.
No, we agree. This is, it ties up our agenda also, so, and town council is very busy, but he always gives us great service.
And he is, and he's a great guy, so.
So, then it would be appropriate for you to request an extension of the approval period, which right now is November 2nd, to November 23rd, which is the Friday after the Monday of the 19th. And the reason we do that is in case there's a snowstorm or
Fair.
some problem, we can still post a meeting that week and get it done.
Yep.
So is that your request to extend the approval period for both major site plan and lower impact special permit to November 23rd, close of business?
Yeah.
Thanksgiving is the 22nd. Is the town hall open on the 23rd?
It is not, no,
So let's change that to, let's see, 19, 20, 21st. We'll extend the approval period to November 21st. That would still give us time to post a meeting 48 hours in advance and get it done. So that's your request. Mr. Mills?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we extend the public hearing for extend the approval period for 154, 156 Northborough Road, major site plan approval, and also for 154, 156 Northborough Road, special permit lower impact development to November 21st, end of business day on November 21st, 2018.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? So the period of approval has been extended to November 21st, which now has us continuing the public hearing. Mr. Mills?
Oh, sorry.
Hold
Oh, sorry.
It's on there.
Make a motion that we extend the public hearing for 154, 156 Northborough Road, major site plan approval for November 19th, 2018 at 7 PM, and also extend the public hearing for 154, 156 Northborough Road Special Permit Lower Impact Development for 7:05 PM on November 19th, 2018.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? 5-0. We'll see you on the 19th, and you'll be hearing from the town planner, and town council well before that, we hope.
And if you don't see our firm again, we just want to we want to thank the board for going through this and their attention to detail. We really appreciate the board's help on this, so thank you.
Thank you. Oh, you have to sign this, Joel. That's your request for the extension.
Motion for a 2-minute recess?
That's right here. Motion's been made for a 2-minute recess. Any discussion here? None, all in favor? We'll see you in 2 minutes. Okay, the planning board is back in session after a 2-minute recess. Next item on the agenda is continued public hearing from October 15th for 118, 120 Turnpike Road, major site plan approval, and the same address for special permit, lower impact development. I'll ask the town planner to update us on what's happened since October 15th's opening of the public hearing.
Hi, thanks for coming. So on, let me see here. We opened the public hearings on October 15th, and they were continued to this evening. In the interim, Fuss and O'Neill has provided some review comments on the plans, but the biggest part of this is that we did ask town council for a legal opinion regarding reference to a zoning ordinance 174-5D, which appears to restrict what you're proposing for expansion of the parking lot. When we received that information from town council, I was then able to call Fuss and O'Neill to hopefully stop them, but they had already prepared the review of the plans. So we always make an effort to try and, so that, you know, you're not doing extra that you don't have to. But they did submit review letter this evening, or earlier today. And usually we would have received another submission from the engineering and the applicant team, but because of this concern with the zoning bylaw, everything's kind of on hold, and I believe the Mr. Cox and Cornerstone are here to discuss this legal opinion and potential next steps or some ideas.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you. So the board wants to hear from you. You have town council's opinion letter?
Yes, we have.
Okay, so one of the things on our mind is to continue the public hearing until there's more clarity, if it's needed, or to close the public hearing based on town council's opinion that this project cannot go forward. So I'll turn it over to you and get your opinion as to what you want to do tonight.
Thank you.
Mr. Cox,
Stephen Cox, we met last few weeks.
so let's tell the public who you are and what, and
Stephen Cox, I represent, I'm the asset manager for the ownership of both buildings, 118 and 120 Turnpike Road. So we've received the town council's opinion, and you know, we're not ecstatic about it, but we accept it. So we would like to continue this hearing after further, so we can have some further discussion about this. And you know, what we really would like is to ask some guidance from the planning board in terms of various options for the next steps. I mean, we bought one occupied building in 2013. We bought another foreclosed building in 2014. We spent $1.7 million on that building to upgrade it and lease it, which we've done. We also spent $800,000 installing a Class A Title V septic system, because the septic system on the existing buildings were leaking, if you can believe it. And so, you know, this is a long-term project for us. It's owned by a family trust. It's not a developer entity. It's a long-term holder, and they like to lease their buildings when they, on their real estate portfolio. They also like to improve them. I think we've proven that here. We've done it in North Reading, Tewksbury, and other suburban Boston locations. So, you know, we've had several tenants looking at the space. It just vacated. That's the 120 building. We discussed this already. Some of them are looking for an additional 200 parking stalls. We have one tenant now that's looking at both buildings. They want 300 more parking stalls. And so it's just in the nature of the market right now. And so what I'd like to be able to do is get some guidance from the board in terms of what might be some reasonable options to do something here. We own the land, it's a single owner, and there's various options we can think about. We can think about building a parking deck. We can think about rezoning a portion of the land and dedicating the balance to the town. We can talk about some combinations, of that. But it would help us if we could get a little direction from the board in terms of what might feel better to the board. But we definitely would want to continue the hearing.
Well, there's a couple of things procedurally. If the project that you're proposing can't be built, the public hearing was advertised for weeks before the public hearing opened. And the public looked at documents for a certain project. If that project is changed, then it's a different public hearing.
Okay.
Minor changes as we go through the public hearing process is common, but to go from a parking lot to a parking garage is a different project, and this public hearing would not cover that project. So that's one piece of, I guess, opinion for me, and I will invite the board for their opinions relative to this. Second thing is, I guess we should be honored that you would ask our opinion, but I would caution the board to avoid sending you in any particular direction. And it's not because we don't like you or we don't like the project or we're trying to make you go away, but the board can get in some trouble sending you in a certain direction and having you go there, and then it's not the right thing and the board rejects it, and you feel as though you got some bad advice from the board. We don't very often hear from proponents that ask us what we think about the different options, especially relative to the whole project. Features of the project we get questioned on, and we express our opinion, usually related to open space or the road layout.
Right.
But I'm going to open it up to the board for their opinions and comments, but I would caution you and the board to avoid sending you in any particular direction, but invite you to come back with things that you would then put in front of us and perhaps ask our opinion on a specific thing rather than having us send you in a general direction.
Perfectly understood.
Mr. Jenks.
Good evening. It occurs to me that the issue is a zoning issue, pretty completely a zoning issue, dealing with what you are allowed to do. It's complicated by the fact that your lot is split between the highway business district and the residential. And I looked quickly at some of the zoning, and at first blush, it looks like it might be, there might be an issue for the zoning board. I guess I was trying to decide whether parking in the residential zone would require approval of two uses. The residential use, which is inherent in that zone. And because the parking would not be incidental to the resident usage, would that be considered another primary use? And I guess my only suggestion would be to make sure you have a complete understanding of the zoning requirements for your whole lot, for the residential zone and the highway business zone. So I think your solution has got to be in there somewhere.
Mr. Mills?
Yeah, I echo what the chairman said. I mean, I understand the need that you have for the new tenants, what you're looking to do, but in helping design it, that isn't the correct solution, you know, beyond a complete new proposal. That's not something we dive into, so not that I'm against it or for it. And coming up with that solution is, I guess, more on you, Vito.
Yeah, we have options. We just didn't know if you'd be in favor or strongly against some of the options, like a parking garage or something like that of a structure. That would obviously get us the spaces. We're just looking to see your first feelings on, you know, is a parking garage something that you would be against or for, or kind of in between? You'd want to see how it looked first, or, you know, you have concerns with certain things with the garage, the height, you know, what would your concerns be if we go ahead with that? Or, you know, we're just trying to get your feel, not for you to design it, and we know it would be a separate application if we change the scope, you know, from surface parking to a garage or something like that. We're just trying to get a little sense of, you know, how you're feeling and what your sense is on something like that.
I don't know, I'd like to
Does
see
all of
the
the
plan.
above help?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to,
Exactly. That's very good,
Yeah.
actually.
just like to see the
That's
plan,
good.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, I don't know if there's something that, you know, if, you know, something stuck out that you'd say, you know, we really don't favor something like that, favor a garage, would look if you do something else, or, you know, the potential for, say, rezoning a portion of it, if you'd be somewhat in favor of something like that, or, you know, if that's something you'd be adamantly against, or, you know, something,
We,
you know.
we were interested in Aldo's, closing comments and his opinion that suggested rezoning, and thinking that may actually be, in fact, an approach, even though it's a lengthy effort. That may be an approach where we could decide on the future, if you will, of all the land, and zone a portion of it highway business and the balance conservation land, and then it's over, and there's not much more discussion, and then we develop parking that works for everyone.
Mrs. Luttrell?
I agree with my colleagues. I have no strong aversion to either options that you've,
Okay.
but I need to see a plan and
Clearly.
look at them and mull them over.
Okay.
This board has approved site plans for parking decks, parking garages. We've also approved parking lots. We've approved open space. So it wouldn't be the first parking garage that the board has approved. And actually, the proponents that were in here before you tonight, the first agenda item, is on land that was rezoned from residential to, what is it, commercial now? Industrial park. It was many years ago, but it was actually rezoned from residential. So the things that are on your mind are not inconsistent with actions that have come before this board and prevailed. Now, if you're thinking of rezoning, then, you know, we're trying to figure out what to do here tonight. We have a public hearing for that project. And if that project is out the window, then we should close the public hearing. If you're looking to rezone, and you want to keep the public hearing open, the public hearing would have to go until springtime.
Right.
And that's kind of stretching the extension of a public hearing without something in between.
Right.
So, I guess I'll ask the board if we are comfortable with continuing the public hearing to our next meeting, giving you some time to figure out a direction. And even if you don't figure it out, you can just, if you do nothing and give us no more information, then the board would be left with what we have for information and left to decide whether or not to continue the hearing further or to close it. And we have closed public hearings unilaterally based on, you know, no further input from the proponent, and the proposal is stalled. And it's not fair to us or the public to continue hearings for projects that aren't moving along.
I actually completely agree with that. If it works for the board, if we continued it to the next.
Which is November 19th.
Yeah, that's fine. And it would give us some time to maybe come back and frankly, just indicate the direction we think we're gonna go, and then you can certainly close the public hearing at that point. If you feel it's appropriate, we would not object, obviously, to that at all.
Right. And if you were going in the direction of some type of a rezoning, then that would set in motion the rezoning groupies that would, be interested in what open space, be interested in the
Right,
commercial expansion,
right.
and it would set in motion the teamwork that usually comes together when there's some type of a rezoning
Which
discussion.
would be perfectly fine. That'd be great to
So
do that.
it's your desire to continue the hearing?
I would ask that, yes.
I'll ask the board. Mr. Mills, your
I'm
opinion?
comfortable with that.
Mr. Jenks?
Was our advertisement for this public hearing broad enough to continue it and then talk about rezoning and not talk about?
I don't think so. I think if they come back and they don't want to somehow move forward with the project that was advertised, but they want to continue the public hearing, I think the board would be in a position to say, no, we're not going to, because the project can't be built.
Right.
And we would vote to close the hearing.
Yeah, that would be my only concern.
And we understand that we,
But we also, I'm trying to think if there's any harm in us continuing a hearing after having the advice from council. And I don't think there's harm in that. So I'm kind of in favor of continuing the hearing to let this information, give everyone a little bit more time. This board doesn't need any more time, I don't think, but it's to accommodate, some time for you to make a decision on which direction.
Yeah, we would appreciate that if the board can do it, if you feel.
Mrs. Luttrell, your opinion on continuing the hearing?
I'm fine with that, I'd agree with that.
Right now, the approval period for the site plan is November 24th, so we're meeting on the 19th. So there's no extension required. And then for the lower impact development, it's December 24th. So, anyone from the public? Yes, Tim?
Hi, Tim Litt, Woodland Road. I just wanted to point out, if the proponents are interested in rezoning, with the new town meeting schedule, that would mean they'd need a warrant article prepared by, like, December-ish, I think. It doesn't give you a whole lot of time. I just want to sensitize you to the fact that it's not instant.
We actually appreciate that comment. We've looked at that, and we understand the timing of the warrant article, so I do appreciate that comment, and we have to be timely.
All right, we'll put this one on at 7:20. Yeah. Yep. So 7:20. Mr. Mills?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we continue the public hearing for 118 and 120 Turnpike Road, major site plan approval for 7:20 PM on November 19th, 2018, and continue the public hearing for 118, 120 Turnpike Road special permit lower impact development for 7:25 on November 19th, 2018.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, we'll see you on the 19th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is a discussion. Stonebrook Village subdivision, release of covenant. I'll ask the town,
Mr. Chairman, I'm
Mrs.
going,
Luttrell.
I'm an abutter to this project, so I'm going to recuse myself.
Thank you. I'll ask the town planner to give us an update on this discussion item. I see we have Mr. Wood in the hall tonight. You look much more refreshed after I saw you when you told me that you stayed up till 3:31.
Yes, sir. Last night I was up till 2 celebrating.
Okay.
Go Southborough.
You gonna go to the parade?
Yes, sir. Wanna come?
Maybe.
I've only missed one for the Bruins. It's on record now.
No, you don't have a microphone, so we didn't pick that up.
Can't hear you.
But I went to a mall.
Okay, quick update on Stonebrook Village. The developer, Capital Group Properties, asked for a release of covenant at a prior planning board meeting. When that happens, the planning department then requests that a bond be estimated for remaining work to be done. So we engaged Fuss & O'Neill to prepare a bond estimate. They did. There was some discussion back and forth upon reviewing it. Fuss & O'Neill then revisited the cost estimate for the bond to not include some of the items that were a little extraneous. Some landscaping that were closer to the units and such that didn't need to be included. So a revised bond estimate was submitted. It's been reviewed by the developer. It's been submitted to the planning board for review. The developer has substantially agreed with the new bond estimate, and they are waiting to prepare a bond agreement or surety, I believe a tripartite, which once they have that established, they'll request to get on the next planning board agenda when they're ready. So they won't be attending this evening.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Mills?
No questions.
Mr. Jenks?
No questions?
I tend to agree also. The review, I think we all reviewed that revised estimate. It's 168,000?
That's correct.
Yeah. So we're all good with that? End of the discussion for tonight?
Mhm.
Next item is discussion, Bradford Oaks subdivision, Metacomet Lane, release of lots. I'll ask the town planner to start the discussion on this one.
Right, 1 second. Okay. Okay, about a month or two ago, we received a request from a person affiliated with One Metacomet. I'm not sure if it was the seller or the buyer's attorney, but this evening, Christina Dauberpool is here, and she recently sold One Metacomet, which was part of a subdivision back in the late 90s called Bradford Oaks subdivision. And during that time, the subdivision went through its regular process of being built and lot release and such. And when Christina Dauberpool was going through her transaction, we were requested by the attorney if we could find the release of covenant that had been endorsed and recorded at that time, because your attorney or the buyer's attorney couldn't find it in the registry of deeds. So we looked everywhere and we found a copy of it, but there was no original. And I also looked on the registry of deeds and I couldn't find it there. So I followed up with the building department and confirmed that there were 4 occupancy permits. The roadway was built, the houses are there, the roadway was accepted, this document's in place. There is a covenant that was recorded that allowed for this next action. So in the past, it's been the simplest way to remedy this is to just do another vote with the current planning board with the same release language, just newly endorsed, notarized, and then filed with the town clerk, and then it get recorded by either your attorney or the buyer's attorney, so that it closes the loop in the title. So the plan you see on the screen was the actual roadway acceptance plan that was recorded, showing the 4 individual house lots there. Sometime in the interim, shortly after the definitive approval, there was an A&R that went through that modified 2 of the middle lots, I believe, slightly. But the we do have the certificates of occupancy on record with the building department. So planning department prepared a new form of release of covenant. that basically repeats the original one from 1999, yes. So it appears everything is in order, to the best of my knowledge.
So the desired action would be to have the board to vote to sign a new release of covenant. Is that correct?
Correct, for all 4 lots, to close out the, doesn't it say 4
Yep.
lots? Yeah.
Mr. Mills, oh, any discussion on this? Mrs. Latrobe?
I have a process question. So an occupancy permit can't be issued until the lots are released, correct? But not, the release doesn't have to be filed before the occupancy permit is issued? I'm just wondering how to prevent this from happening in the future.
There was some kind of breach from it being signed to getting recorded, because the town clerk didn't have it on file either. And usually these documents go to the town clerk, they get stamped in there, and then the developer picks it up and records it so that he can then go build on the lots. I think that's the process. So I'm not sure exactly before or after the building permit, but I think it's, you get your release and then you get your building permit.
I think he's supposed to present the receipt for recording to the building commissioner before he gets a construction permit in that case, occupancy permit.
I did go back to the original developer and request that they check their records, and they did look as well to see if they had a recorded copy.
So it shows here on the second page that in our packet, covenant, and there's a number 170955, and on top it says Bradford Oaks covenant recorded, and it says the book and the page.
So the covenant was recorded.
But the problem is the original?
The release itself was not. So
Oh, I get it,
So
okay.
the covenant's put in place at the end of the definitive subdivision approval. During the appeal period, you get the covenant in place, which says that they are going to build and finish the job in a certain amount of time. When they substantially complete the job of building the development, then the roadway and the infrastructure, they come back to try and start building their lots. And before they can build, they have to request a release of the lots from the covenant so that it's ensured that the majority of the project has been built as far as the roadway and infrastructure. So the covenant was good, but it's usually a 2-year time frame to build the development. But somewhere when the lots got released, that one document that was voted on and notarized just didn't make it through the recording process.
Anyone else? Mr. Mills? Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that the planning board of the town of Southborough, Massachusetts does hereby release lots 1, 2, 3, and 4 as shown on the plan of the land entitled Definitive Plan of Land of Bradford Oaks in Southborough, Mass., prepared by Cornerstone and NEI Company, Consulting Civil Engineers and Land Surveyors, Scale 1 to 40, dated August 28th, 1998, revisions October 28th, 1998, and November 25th, 1998, owner, developer, and subdivider Emerald Isle Realty Trust, 1 Divine Lane, Southborough, Mass. 01772. Said plan is recorded in the Worcester District Registry of Deeds, Plan Book 738, Plan 68.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion?
Sorry, I have another question. So should it be noted that it was released on November 8th of 1999? But not recorded?
So, said plan released in 1999 but not recorded, this rectifying clerical error.
Stated on the endorsement form or stated in the motion?
Probably just the motion.
In the motion. Need a second on the amendment?
Second?
So Phil, you're okay with the motion addressing Mrs. Luttrell's, that'll go on the record, but it won't be in the document that we sign.
I don't think it needs to be. It's, if it's in the record, we're just redoing a release. It could be a confirmatory release. If you, but I don't think there's any harm in just a second release.
We've done it before.
Yeah, it's not gonna create any liability for anybody, so.
Any more discussion? All in favor? 4-0. So we'll sign that before we go home tonight? Is that,
They do have a notary right here that you could sign it.
I got my notary stamp. I'm ready to go.
I suggested they bring somebody in case they wanted to sign it quickly.
so, is that okay with the board? Mr. Mills?
Motion for a 2-minute recess?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded for a 2-minute recess while we sign this, and then we'll be back. Planning Board's back in session after a 2-minute recess for the signing of that fresh covenant. Next item on the agenda is a discussion item, Economic Development Committee, proposed zoning amendment. I'll ask the town planner to update us on this one.
Oh, hi.
Hi, thank you for having
Finally, I'm on this side. Usually I'm over there. A couple weeks ago, we were asked by the interim economic development coordinator, Claire Reynolds, to see if they could join the planning board meeting and hold a joint meeting to talk about a draft bylaw that the EDC is proposing to amend the Business Village District, Section 174-8.4B of the zoning code. And it's reflected in your package with the one page, and I also have it projected on the screen. And I believe it's the bolded number 8. That would be a change, and also a change to the amount of square footage, which is currently at 2,000 square feet. Uses up to that size. I want to point out, I'm not sure if this affects other parts of the bylaw or not. I don't know if you looked into that, but I haven't yet. But
sure, this affects specifically mixed use, from my understanding, in the Business Village District.
okay.
So what our proposal is to add as an allowed mixed use to include residential dwelling units, condominiums, or apartments. And we also talked about maybe putting some sort of parameter or cap onto the number per building, if that was something, we just had it as a discussion point. This is something that the Economic Development Committee has thought about for a long time, and it came from some discussions we had when we were talking about, the master plan from 2008 and different parts of that. As I'm sure you know, we've been focused on about the past year, almost year and a half now, on trying to do some work to the downtown area to help bring in new businesses, to work on beautification, connectivity, help the existing businesses that are there, make it more of a destination for residents to go to. And this is in line with what we saw in the 2008 master plan. A year and a half ago, we put out a survey to the community. We got 427 responses, and we asked, we wanted to kind of take the residents' temperature on different various projects that people may or may not be interested for the downtown area. What we found was very, very strong support for improvements downtown. That ran the gamut. There was strong support. We asked about things like pocket parks and connectivity and bike racks and benches. We also asked about what sort of businesses people would like to see downtown, and there was incredibly strong support for there. Over 96% of the people surveyed were in favor of bringing in new businesses and development downtown, and the vast majority of people were very interested in, over 90% were interested in some sort of restaurant or coffee shop, or and more than 2/3 were in favor of small scale local retail. And we also questioned the residents in the survey about their appetite for mixed use development. Only 15% of respondents said that they were opposed to mixed use development. 52% said that they were in favor, and the rest said, well, it would depend on what was proposed. So I believe there is strong support. Following up on the survey, we had 4 public meetings to discuss the results of the survey, to discuss some of the barriers to infrastructure, to the changes that people wanted to see based on the results of the survey. And then we worked with the Urban Land Institute, who is a kind of quasi-governmental agency that works with towns at a reduced rate to help implement different plans and projects. So we had a meeting with them back toward the end of the spring, and they have issued a report that's almost in final form. We've just kind of been trading comments back and forth, but their recommendations were strongly in line with both the 2008 master plan, as well as the results of our survey, including and encouraging mixed-use development. As I recall, this is also in line with the recommendations of SHOPC in the master plan to have opportunities for different types of housing stock, specifically in the downtown area. So the EDC has decided, we're not the proper place, obviously, to take on a huge zoning overhaul. That's not our mission. That's not our purview. But as respect to how it affects our mission, and specifically the work we're trying to do downtown, we tried to peel off a simple change that we think would have strong community support, and we wanted to discuss it with you as what we felt was the appropriate board to at very least have a discussion, talk about potential flaws with our thinking, or ways we might be able to improve it, or and hopefully kind of flesh it out with you, and hopefully get your support for this to come forward, either brought by you or brought by the selectmen, or if necessary, brought by us at the next town meeting. So I think our intent tonight was just to open a discussion and hopefully get your support for going forward with this or something like this. So I guess anything else, John?
Best way to get this to a town meeting is collaboration between all the boards and committees, so we don't want to step on any toes. We want to make sure we do it correctly. We want to take any input you have to make it work. We just looked at a quick hit that seemed the simplest way to solve a problem down there, if possible. So, thank you for having us.
Yes,
We
thank you.
appreciate that. Yes. I'm sorry.
Barring before we lost our last assistant in planning, I used to sit in on the EDC meetings very frequently. Friday mornings, at least once or twice a month, you held them. And during the time I was attending those was when they were going through this survey for the Business Village District, and the Urban Land Institute was helping you, and you had programs over at St. Mark's where people attended and got information on this. So it was a really big effort that the EDC did to, and it really was helpful to me because I got to know more of the town and the people involved. So that was a great effort with that survey.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome to come to every meeting.
Thank you, I tried.
Mr. Mills.
So, thanks for coming, I appreciate it. It's, I agree, it's great to have everyone collaborate before these things get to town meeting, so.
Yeah.
You don't have big discussions or lengthy discussions in front of everyone. So, it's an interesting idea. I guess the couple things, you mentioned SHOPC was in favor of this. Was the intent then, did they feel that there was gonna be affordable units that were gonna be made available if it was?
Again, and I'm sorry if I misspoke, but I remember there was in the master plan that it did talk about SHOPC and increasing the variety of housing stock. And maybe it wasn't just SHOPC, but there was a general recommendation to increase the variety of housing stock. And I'm certainly not opposed to, to having different levels of housing and different, I'm very strongly in favor of more diversity in the cost of housing in town. That is something we would support. But again, just having, I think our focus is having the option of being able to, it's kind of antiquated, the fact that a mixed use bylaw doesn't include residential. When you talk about mixed use today, most people think about residential, commercial. So the fact that this hasn't historically been one of the options, I think is something that people would be in favor of having as an option.
And the permitted use up to, it's just brackets.
It was just a thought. So currently,
As
it's
much as
limited
you'll
to
allow.
2,000 square feet. As you know, 2,000 square feet, there is not much retail, or there's not much of anything that could be put in 2,000 square feet. That's a pretty low bar. I firmly am in favor of some sort of limits. I don't think it should be 50,000 square feet, but I think that, for me, this is just,
That would be more
Just
in
a
your
discussion
purview,
part.
in
Yeah,
your
this is
expertise.
just
That's
a-
why it's in brackets.
Yeah.
That's,
and same with my bracket in number 8 below, to the extent I thought it might be reasonable to want to control the number of housing units in any particular building. I don't believe that that most residents of Southborough are interested in especially as to the business village districts, are interested in major residential developments, but I think, from my understanding, the appetite is more for, I don't know what the right number is, but I don't think it's, it might be 8 or something like that. But again, this was just a launching pad for a discussion on this. I don't really care much what that number is, as long as it's something that's reasonable that, for the type of development we're looking for.
So, and I try to balance, like, how do we manage the rural characteristics of the town that everyone was drawn to
Yep.
originally, to maintain that, and as we go forward, not maintain, but try to keep that in line with,
Absolutely.
the master plan and
agree.
everything.
And that's
And-
actually written right into our mission, so that's certainly something that we're in favor of, is maintaining the character and charm of Southborough, so.
And the concern would be, depending on what that allowed square footage becomes, that, people can get pretty crafty with consolidating lots, saying, oh, now I can, blow this out, do this, that, and all of a sudden it looks a lot different than it originally did. Might be good, might be bad, depending on the person looking at it. I guess, so are you looking for us to define that square footage?
Again, it's just a discussion point. I think there's very little that can be done with 2,000 square feet. I thought that number was very low. I don't know what the right number is. I'm happy to propose something if you're interested, but I don't know if
Yeah.
the board hasn't voted on anything. I don't want to speak for the
that's what
committee.
we came into you.
Yeah. This
We're
is-
referring to your
again, this is
expertise on
just to open
that,
a
on what
discussion.
you think would be reasonable.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Vice Chairman?
You need a mic.
Planning board.
Kathy, it hasn't been that long, you haven't forgotten you need a mic.
I know. But I know he's gonna call me Mrs. Bartolini. When the last official thing that the planning board did to sort of put to bed the work of the ZAC, and then the takeover by the planning board and the 6 months of public hearings, was a complete review of every written and oral proposal to amend that document. And we voted on like as many as 200 of them.
I recall.
And they are on record. And one of the things, but I can't remember the specificity of the number, but one of the things I believe we voted was a change in the square footage and the types of uses for the central business district. Since that then got voted by the planning board, the rewrites in our proposals and our specific, we reject this proposal, we approve this, we modify this written letter to read this way. But then I think I really don't know why it wasn't just fear of mentioning the 3 letters of ZAC. I think we had a changeover in planning staff, I think, once again, and it got put on the shelf. The EDC took it down off the shelf and had Mr. Morris come to one of our workshop meetings where we had a breakout session on downtown other things on open space and connectivity and issues with the downtown, the septic issues for certain. And at that time, when we broke out into groups to discuss it, not only no one disagreed with what was there for the changes in the revised planning board document, they actually said, gee, if this had been this way, we wouldn't have been fighting this back in the public hearing. And I mean, I was sitting there chairing that breakout group and was like in a state of shock. But I think that what eventually the planning board did is we could go back and check to see whether we address that issue of increasing, the definition of mixed use included residential, and it included increases in the usage, square footage, because we understood that to do all of the things that were going to be necessary, there was going to have to be a large enough project to have a return to make it feasible. We didn't want to write something that looked good but was useless because it wasn't economically feasible. So, long answer to, I think you've already got the number in your history, and it's literally your number.
I think Zach changed it to 3,500 in the latest review of the draft zoning bylaw. It was changed back to 2,000. By the last one that I don't. You want a date?
No, I mean, was it post that document that they voted that I was referring to, or?
The last thing that happened was that Paul Semino took it and redlined it. That draft document.
Okay, that's what I thought it stated 3,500, but okay. Okay.
So, I mean, I think, I guess it's nice to have some upper limit compared to what your mind could race to.
Absolutely.
And so then I fall back on just if we are gonna put forth the residential dwelling units, condominiums, apartments, not to exceed X number per building, it would make sense to me that we should also put in like the number we expect to be affordable in that, at that site, period. Not, oh yeah, I'll do that, we'll buy it and put it somewhere else, but would be at that location, mixed in with the whatever that development is. But the overall concern would be that, we're not gonna make it so that the business villages and everything are gonna get wiped out completely, because I used to live in one of those villages. It was a lot of fun. It was nice tight little area. I know Fayetteville, for instance, been encroached upon dramatically with development that's happened through the New England Center for Children for what they needed and everything. So it'd be a shame to see all the villages get completely converted to something that they weren't originally.
That's certainly not what we're interested in, but I don't think that I don't think that this type of change would do that, again, because this is for mixed use. So again, we're looking for something, specifically what we're looking for is something that we can have some sort of business on the bottom with small scale residential on the top. And, from the master plan and our survey and the ULI, we feel like we have a pretty strong temperature on what the residents are interested in. And I think this fits within that. Nobody on our committee is looking for chains and franchises where, we're very focused on, especially, at least in the downtown area, we're very focused on maintaining the bucolic term everywhere, but we're focused on the downtown area right now. You know, we're looking for, also, there are so many businesses in Southborough. We do have a very strong business community. We do have several big companies. And one thing that we've heard in working with other communities and with some of these larger businesses is that they have trouble attracting employees because of the limited housing stock. And they're trying to bring in younger people, but there's nowhere for them to live here locally, or they struggle trying to find a place for them to live here locally. So this would be an option that I think would be helpful to the business community as well.
That surprises me, because I keep seeing, for Madison Place, it always seems like they've always got availability, so it's surprising is that
And
they
again,
said that there's no
maybe
stock.
that was before Madison Place came in. We definitely heard that comment, but a lot of people are looking for something that's not an apartment complex on Route 9. They're looking for a diverse and active
Someplace they can walk.
vitality and
Yeah, go to the
area.
market, get
Exactly.
pizza.
They're looking for somewhere that they can walk, not looking to live on along Route 9. They're looking for somewhere where there is, vitality and community and, a sense of, a place to be. And that's sort of what we're looking, is to make it a place where our community wants to come together.
I don't think anybody's looking to have an Avalon or something to
No.
that scale
No.
downtown, but it would be nice to have options for these different buildings that are empty, that people can't figure out what they want to do with, and it's like, oh geez, if I put a couple apartments here and I could put some office space down here, or a coffee shop, or a bakery, or something downstairs and make a little bit of money, I think it'd be great. The red building next to Falcone's, that's been empty. I'd love to see something go in there, a brew pub, that'd be ideal. It'd be nice to, if you live upstairs, you're not gonna get popped for DUI, 'cause you're just walking downstairs.
You just have to smell them brewing beer all the time.
Not
There
necessarily
were
a bad
smells.
thing.
There were smells.
Okay. I think I'm good for now.
Mr. Jenks?
I'm going to comment on some of the wording, some of the words, because hopefully that'll help get it in order. You're in heading B up there, and you talk about permitted uses up to some certain square footage. So if you've got a building with multiple uses, are you talking about each one of those uses can be 2,000? Or are you talking about the building that the uses are in?
So that's, this language minus the brackets is exactly how the code reads now.
I
So
understand
however,
that, and that's one of the
currently
problems.
interpreted. I guess, how is that currently interpreted?
Consider that a rhetorical question, something needs to be thought about. That's my point there.
But how
How is
has
it
that
that-
been implemented
Yeah, how has it been implemented in the past?
The
Like, if-
building.
Right now, what's that?
as
sir?
the building?
As the
Building.
the whole building?
Yeah,
If you look at the setbacks that are in the code, it's the building.
Okay.
so the question was asked earlier, does this affect anything, any other wording in the zoning code? And my recommendation is it should, because given the very short history of Mr. Bemis's project downtown, if you don't define some of these terms, it leaves us right where we are with the word apartment and the issues that has caused, so.
That's why we came to you, to try to avoid that ever happening again. In
well,
the
that's-
simplest, easiest way we could,
Then,
with a quick fix, not like a,
then I guess I agree with why you came to us, because,
thank you.
it should be.
Do you know where else we should look for the wording? Any other
Well, you
sections?
generally do on the computer, a word search for some of these things and see what pops up.
Right, and we
Okay.
may have to cross-reference the statute itself, so that's,
So,
the section itself. That's, I agree with John.
I would I would not use the word condominiums, because that isn't a thing. That's the ownership, that's how it's owned. So, I know people look at apartment buildings and say those are condominiums. All that means is the way they are owned and usually operated. And we can't control that in zoning anyway. So apartments, you know, that's the one that was the issue downtown, and I think that process has gone forward through zoning by calling the apartments a hotel unit because that is spelled out in the code as an acceptable use. So they call it a hotel, but it's going to be an apartment. And a little bit of definition might solve that whole problem.
Would it be better to keep it as just residential dwelling unit?
Well, that's a possibility too, and then have a definition for residential dwelling unit. The hotel or motel business gets into more of what makes something a hotel. And I think my friend to the right here said, well, it's not a hotel because hotels have linen service and things like that. And I got to thinking about that a little bit, and yeah, maybe today, but what used to be on that site was a service station. I don't remember it as a service station in the sense that someone would come out and pump gas for you and wash your windshield and headlights and check oil and put air in your tires. And now, most of the gas stations, you don't even get someone pumping the gas for you. So, some still do. So those things change, and it's not inconceivable that there would be something called a motel or a hotel that didn't necessarily have linen service. And so if you define it in terms of a zoning code, definitions ought to be kept fairly simple. I disagreed with our building inspector who said if the item wasn't defined in the building code, you go to the in the zoning code, you go to the state building code. And I can understand how he does that. But they're two very different documents for different purposes. And in fact, the case law would tell you that you go to common usage of a word if it isn't defined. And somebody mentioned Black's Dictionary, but I don't think you even do that. You just get a common definition of it. So I'd make that line 8 as simple as you think you can get away with it, will serve the purpose, and then define it, and make, if you're inclined to, make the definition broad. If you're trying to make this restrictive, then you probably want to work on a specific definition, but and it's guesswork whether you want it specific or general, because it depends on what project comes along. Um, I'm wondering if we ought to look at all 8 lines in that definition. There was question about an item like newspaper, job printing and publishing. I'm old enough to know that job printing is contracted printing. If you come in with a package of documents and say, I want this printed and bound, that would be a job, printing job, it's job printing. The same press would perhaps be used for other purposes, but I think if you look through all of those, you try to think how that's gonna get complicated when someone brings it up as a use they want a permit for. And things like clinic or medical testing laboratory. That could be very complex. I don't know if that would exclude medical lab, where they draw blood and run tests and so forth.
We're trying to make as few changes to the existing law,
There's advantage to that too,
and that's why we only added this change on the bottom.
yeah.
We're just trying to keep it as simple as humanly possible initially.
On
And
one-
try to make it that something that everybody can live with, and we can try to get it through.
Understandable. On one hand, that's a great way of doing it. On the other hand, if you can use that to clean up a couple of other terms, that's good too, so. The biggest advantage, I probably were on television, the big advantage you could get in getting something like this passed is get it to the very last item on the warrant. That's simple. But that's a different story. So those would be my comments on this, I guess. Dawn, do we, when an actual article is drafted, do we have to hold a public hearing on that? We don't.
We do.
We do,
We do for zoning articles,
Yeah.
and that's what this would be.
okay.
You need a microphone, Kathy.
Nobody called you Kathy.
He called me Kathy, he didn't call me Mrs. Bartolini. I'm interested, and I know the EDC is too, is the planning board interested in working on this as a collaborative project? Where, for instance, we would sit down, 1 or 2 from each board, and go over the document that currently sits on the shelf and look and see, because I believe it has those definitions, those revised definitions that you're looking for. The actual wording you might not agree with, but that was one of the things that we were always taught in doing that rewrite. If you put a word in here, you gotta make sure it's defined consistently in every section, and you have a definition section at the opening of the bylaw. So much of the work has been done by the planning board. Could we work collaboratively on this as opposed to coming back every other week or something and talking about getting, the joint verbiage is, I guess, what the group right kind of exercise can be tedious. And if we could agree on that and then come back as a jointly sponsored article, for instance.
Words are important. When you say, can we work collaboratively on this, what do you mean by this? Are you talking?
The article
Are you
itself
talking
in
about
the.
this article?
Yeah, I
Or are
think.
you going back into the zoning code and?
I'm talking about this article. But the very, very valid point, I mean, I've made a lot of notes on what you said, and I'm sitting here going, he's right. But we could go into the section of the definitions of the last version the planning board voted as something that they was going to bring forward sometime in the future, and see if that wording has already, that cross-referencing of the wording has already been done, and we still agree on it, then we don't need to reinvent the wheel.
Would that do more than to tell you where you need to make a change to add that wording?
I don't think so. I think all we're trying to find out is, does the word need a definition added to definitions, which is another section of the bylaw that would have to be added into the article? Or, great, define it and show, and put that in as part of the article. Here's the definitions. Look for those terms, if any, that are undefined without, and/or are defined, but without a confirming vote of town meeting. Because your document, is your document. It's not a town meeting approved document. And not everybody on the planning board was on that group that did it. But that's why I think it can become a little bit of a bigger project. Zoning always becomes a bigger project than you think it's going to. And if we did it jointly with those who already did the wordsmithing, it might be helpful.
I will point out, as Dr. Litt was kind enough to point out earlier, that town meeting is right around the corner.
Exactly.
And this has to be done
And filed earlier than usual, so, yeah, that's why I'm looking for the collaborative and decreasing number of meetings, that by the time we come back, we have at least 2 EDC people saying, and 2 planning board people that are in agreement on the wording, and we talk it over with our own boards and then can move forward. I'm just trying to think of what would expedite the process and be jointly owned.
Thank you.
Mrs. Luttrell.
So if I understand you, the problem you're trying to solve is you're trying to create a mixed use with business in residential upstairs?
That's correct.
Because we don't have a mixed use bylaw, really. We have that you can have more than one use in a lot. It's kind of a Frankenstein mixed use. It's not really a mixed use. And this just adds another use. So you could have residential dwellings, condos, and apartments by themselves with no business down below. It's just an added use under Business Village. It's not mixed use.
So my understanding, and I may be wrong, this is certainly not my area of expertise, but if you want if you want more than one use within the Business Village district, you have to apply for that through the zoning board, is that correct? And through the zoning board, you can then use more than one of these uses on this list, is that right? So that's what we're asking for, is obviously it's not by right, but which I think, we can talk about whether that should be the case or not, but in the interest of trying to do this in a way that we thought was simple and hopefully not too controversial, and that can be done expeditiously, we thought that this was a simple fix. We hoped that we would be able to get your support for this or something like this. And this, again, because we're not the experts, we're coming to you and asking if there's a different way. But from our initial research into this seemed to be the way that was simple to do it. And I think I'm correct in saying that this would get us the potential for mixed use with ZBA approval, right? Okay.
This would be an acceptable use under the zoning board.
Under Business Village.
Yes.
But it,
And that's,
but it's not a mixed-use bylaw. We don't have a mixed-use
Right.
bylaw. We
Right,
kind of
This would
have
just be an
a,
acceptable use in that area, just like.
adding another use, yeah.
Within the same structure.
In the same structure.
Not necessarily.
Right.
It's adding another use under Business Village.
The way I heard the building inspector talk about this 3 different meetings I've gone to hear him, that the current bylaw allows in the same building any combination of uses that are allowed in the downtown by right. So that's why the current project that was approved has the proposal of offices or stores on the first floor and housing on the second. And that definitely meets the definition of a mixed-use building. And if we think we need to solve that, I think it's a good point you're bringing up. Are we solving the clear, not open to future interpretation, clearly that mixed use is allotted and what kind of mixed uses those are? Or are we allowing for mixed uses generally to go along with a sentence that says the building can contain any of the following permitted uses allowed in the general district? I think that's the issue you're trying to.
Well, my issue is that I would, and as I mentioned at the EDC meeting that this was initially brought up, I would not be in support of adding apartments to a use, but I would be in support of doing a mixed-use overlay or something that would allow mixed use in the business village.
As a separate standalone building? Or a combination of both uses in the same structure?
can you?
A mixed use, which is usually business below, residential above.
Okay.
And the other thing is that we have an adaptive reuse bylaw, which allows mixed use in historic commercial buildings, which almost all of those downtown are. So it's already there. It allows apartments.
So can you just, and again, you guys are the experts and I'm not, but can you explain to me what the difference would be for the effect of doing an overlay, as you suggested, for mixed use versus changing it in this, in the way we've proposed?
So an overlay for mixed use would allow, I think, what you're trying to do, have the retail below and residential above. What we have now is we have one section of the bylaw that says you get a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals to allow for more than one use on a lot. That's not really, the mixed use that we're talking about, and I don't think that's what that was intended for. I think it was intended if you had a building, you could have, an office and a retail or something. I don't know. I don't think it was intended for mixed use, the retail with the residential above. Thus, we don't have a residential use currently in our business village district. It would just be cleaner if you want mixed use to do mixed use rather than trying to cobble things together to make something work that wasn't really meant to work that way to begin with. Zoning is complicated.
Every meeting I come to, I say, you guys are talking so far over my head. So I was gonna say, could you explain this like you're talking to a kindergartner, because that's me. So, is creating this overlay, is that something that you think could be possibly done by town meeting? the annual town meeting, is that like a huge undertaking? Again, please excuse my ignorance on the scale of the size of an overlay versus this verbiage, but if we can get your support on something, I'll do whatever it takes.
My personal opinion is that zoning is complicated and it takes much longer than you think. I worked on the adaptive reuse that everybody was in favor of, and it was far more complicated and took way longer than we ever thought.
And-
So I don't think zoning is ever easy and a quick fix that you can just slab dab it and be on your way.
And I think, and I completely appreciate that, and I was not part of the last zoning effort that was slightly before my involvement, and I think it's happening maybe right before, right around the time that I moved here. But it's sort of like the thing that shall not be named when it's talked about, because it was, I know it was a very long and difficult effort that unfortunately didn't result in any significant changes. So I'm certainly concerned about that, and I appreciate wanting to do something in a different way. We're certainly open to discussing different portions, different ways of getting to the same result. But I think for this seems like something, whether it was originally intended that this be used as, to permit mixed use or not, it certainly could be used for that now. And when this law was written, maybe that wasn't something that was considered, but it's certainly something that currently has been recommended by the 2008 master plan, which has not been implemented, and is certainly something that our residents are looking for, and was recommended by the Urban Land Institute. So my personal feeling is that if the reason why we tried to take off something small and hopefully non-controversial, we certainly want to support larger scale zoning efforts as well, but we think that this would could potentially have a positive impact in a short time frame. And from my understanding, and again, I'm not the expert, from everything I've heard so far, is that this would get us to the same result.
I think the master plan and the zoning advisory committee, the diagnostic document from the consultant the town hired, both recommended a mixed-use bylaw or a mixed-use overlay. And there have been many changes to the zoning code since the ZAC didn't go through. Just because that didn't go through in entirety, there have been things that have gone through since then. And there have been many things from the master plan that have been implemented also.
I just had a couple of comments, and I hope I'm accurate. But right now, the code has 174, 8.4 business village district. So it's one size fits all. And I think when we were working with the ZAC, we broke the business village districts into the villages. So there was one for downtown, there was one for Fayetteville, there was one for Corderville and Southville. So, and each of them were better tailored for those particular neighborhoods. Something that would work down here on Main Street might be a disaster in Corderville. Might not fit, might not be the right thing. So that's why we did that, but it never went anywhere. So when you're doing this, you have to remember that we're not just thinking about downtown, we're thinking about the 4 villages. So, and I know we've had this discussion many times, and it might be why the 2,000 square feet went back there, because it doesn't the code, it's just a permitted use without a special permit. Up to 2,000 square feet, it's allowed. Get a building permit and off you go. That's a 40-foot by 50-foot building in any one of these villages. That's a big building. And it can be up to 35 feet maximum height. That's a big building without a special permit. So I know when we were putting together this, the original business village district, people liked the idea of the special permits, some from the planning board and some from the ZBA, so that there'd be public hearings and that the, you know, the proponent had to deal with the neighbors through that special permit process. So my recommendation is to not go there and change the 2,000 square feet. Might work fine downtown, but we're not just talking downtown, we're talking about those other districts. So,
2,000 is too small for downtown to make the project economically feasible.
well, then, if it's too small to make it economically feasible, then you come in with a 3,000 or 4,000 square foot building, and that just triggers the special permit process. Doesn't say you can't do it, it just puts you into a different process to get to the goal line. I'm just saying, like everyone I think is saying, Phil said it, John, you said it, you know, trying to keep it simple. So you're trying to add residential dwelling units.
Don, I have a question. Could you just clarify? So if you're saying that if somebody wanted to come in with a project, a proposed project of 3,000 square feet, that would just trigger the special permit process, is that a different standard than the use? Because my understanding is you couldn't come in and ask for a special permit to add residential. Is that correct, or is that incorrect?
Well, it has to be an allowed use, because it says here for the,
Okay.
it says permitted uses by special permit from the planning board are as follows. All uses listed in subsection B, which is the uses that we've been talking about that are listed here. This is subsection
So you
B.
couldn't get a special permit for a different use,
Correct.
but you could get a special permit
For a bigger use.
but
Well, if you go down the list of, it says all uses listed in subsection B. And then it also says major residential development. So it goes beyond what's in section B. Multifamily dwellings, if within a major residential development. Hospital, if you go to section B, a hospital is not allowed. Clinic is, but a hospital is not. Nursing home. So yeah, it's an expanded use under the special permit, but it also includes the uses that you've got listed here. It doesn't exclude them. I'm just saying, if you leave the 2,000 square feet alone, you're taking that off the table. If I was living in Corderville and the 2,000 went to 3,000 or 4,000, I think I'd stand up and say, I don't like that. That's too big for my neighborhood. So if you leave it alone, it's not a discussion item. You're just trying to keep it simple with the residential dwelling units.
Okay.
That's my recommendation.
I'm
is to
certainly
leave it.
open for further discussion. I mean,
Now, as
there
far
aren't a
as-
lot of businesses that can go in 2,000 square feet, but there's.
But
Well,
this
I
is-
think you're
what he's
missing
saying
the
is
point.
it's not prohibiting it, they just have to get a special
It
permit
just
to
takes,
increase it.
Okay,
takes you
that's fine.
from just dealing with the building inspector for a 50-foot by 40-foot new building, no public hearing, don't have to tell the neighbors, just get a building permit and build it. I don't know if you'd like to have that happen in your neighborhood, I wouldn't. So if it's over 2,000 square feet, you have to go through the special permit process with the planning board, which is, it's done all the time. And if it's a good project and it's 4,000 square feet, then why, and the neighbors are in favor of it, but they're involved. That was the big thing with the village district, was to make sure that the neighbors in these villages and the public beyond the neighbors are involved. And that's why that limit was put in there.
But Donnie, would it be, going back to the original proposal I made, of at least 2 people from the planning board, maybe 2, so that we,
I'd like to get to that in a minute.
okay, because I think the things, I've got tons of notes. I mean, there's some very valid things, and I'm trying to figure out how to write it that would make that, and Julie wrote this and did a great job. But I'm trying to figure out how we can do this and not repeat this exercise. Next time, someone will find words, or the rewrite of the words brought up different issues, and we can go at it for a while. And I'm trying to figure out how we can get us both on, we're on the same page, but we haven't got to the same paragraph, much less the same sentence.
I would suggest that this article be, the proponent for this article be the EDC. The planning board would vote to support or not to support. Selectmen would vote to support or not to support. Not sure about having it as a joint sponsoring. And then as far as collaborative effort, every day somebody comes into the town planner and says, we need to do a collaborative effort, which results in the town planner doing all the work. So I think it's a good idea. It's a whole new concept,
That's
John.
not what our intent was, though, on this
Right,
time.
Right, but
Really isn't.
I'll tell you, we're very, conscious of collaborative efforts that wind up being dumped into the planning department for the planning board to do, or the town planner to do. And then when it goes well, it's a collaborative effort, and if it goes down the drain, it was a failure, another failure by the planning board. So we're sensitive to making sure that it's not another additional workload dumped onto the town planner. I don't think you've got a long way to go. I think some of the comments you got here, you're keeping this really simple. And Kathy, you and I had that discussion on the phone a couple of weeks ago, try to keep it simple. And then, and I think you're almost there. Phil said get rid of the words condominiums. If you define dwelling units, it could be even simpler. And it's not the first time we've had a warrant article, a zoning article, that has new or revised text in one section that is accompanied by a new definition. It's pretty simple. So I don't think you've got a long way to go with this. Now, Mrs. Luttrell has, I think, a very strong opinion about a better way to do this. So, and I agree that it starts to get more and more complicated and more time, and then it winds up nothing getting done. So, it could be that we go ahead with something really simple, this number 8, leaving the 2,000 square feet alone, coming up with a definition that's hopefully easy to understand, and launching with that. If it passes, then the next step for the next town meeting would be to review these items and then bring forward an overlay district. So you'd be doing it in 2 steps. The one step would be to add the use, and then the second step would be to not to change any uses, but to apply it as an overlay district, which Mrs. Luttrell seems to have more knowledge about than certainly I do. At one time, we had no overlay districts in Southborough. I think we have one right now, and it's the solar panels. It's the only overlay district we have. So we kind of steered away from those, but it may be time now in our the maturity of our town to look into those. So those are my suggestions. So I would think that it looks to me like you guys can pick one person, and we've just picked Mrs. Luttrell to be our, to be our volunteer, and just, you know, get the next phase. I don't think you're that far away at all, because as we discussed and we're hearing, keep it simple. And then we'll come back with a warrant article that has a new use, new definition. The boards like it. Show it to Aldo. He's okay with it. And off we go. Open it up to, Tim, what, did you get tired? Sam, he was there for like an hour.
He gave up, so it's my turn.
Oh, all right. Okay, you guys decide.
I have a couple of quick points. Sam Stivers, Presidential Drive, former zoning board member and ZAC member, so I think I've got some understanding of the technical issues with this. I think John and Julie raised pretty interesting questions here. Julie asked about the distinction between the overlay district and the change in the bylaw. I think from a practical standpoint, the change in the bylaw language that's proposed here creates an interesting ripple effect into other business village districts than the downtown area. There are other business village districts, as Don pointed out. I think there's a real risk of getting people from those parts of town standing up and saying, wait a minute, I'm not so happy with this because it affects my district as well. And I think you don't need too many of those to create a problem for a 2/3 approval requirement. So the overlay district is far more surgical in this process in terms of getting it done without affecting those other business village districts. And I think from a practical standpoint, that greatly increases your odds of getting approval, since I think there is a fairly strong support in the downtown area for this. You could do it with an overlay without affecting those other districts potentially negatively. Who knows what those folks are going to say, but I think there's a good chance enough of them might stand up and say, we don't want this in our district, so I'm going to vote against this. John's question about how difficult it is, I think it's not difficult to draft it. I think if you put 3 or 4 of the right people in a room, in a matter of a few hours, you could come up with a pretty good whack at an overlay district that would do what we're talking about doing here. I think the practical challenge is that you then have to socialize that out there in the world and go through various hearings and talk to the neighbors affected, et cetera, et cetera. And that process is something that, at least my experience is, that takes a lot longer than you think it should take. And I think there's a real challenge in terms of getting all that done in a way that people would understand and be comfortable with what you would be proposing for an overlay district for the March town meeting. I think there's a chance you could get that done, but it's, to me, a very substantial hill to climb to even get the overlay district done, which I think is by far the best way to do something like this without adversely or potentially adversely affecting some of the other districts. So, and as Ms. Luttrell said, I think it's a lot more complicated, unfortunately, than most people think when you start with this process, not only from the technical aspects of the bylaw change, but the sort of procedural aspects in terms of getting the right number of people on board with it without a long period of time of explaining and selling, if you will, to the community. So it's unfortunate. I mean, we saw this with the ZAC process, and unfortunately not an easy thing to do. But I think, again, if you're looking at a way to get it done, I think overlay is by far the better approach. Personal opinion. Thank you.
Mr. Stivers, sorry, I had a quick question for you. What do you think about the two-stage approach, such as Mr. Morris' suggestion is going in with making this change and then moving on down?
I think with starting with this language, I think you're going to wind up with some opposition from places that you that are hard to predict right now. So I guess I would start with the overlay district, and then if it works there, then I think you actually sort of reverse the process and try it in other areas as well till you get something that works in all the business village districts, if that seems to make sense. I'm actually supportive of mixed use. I think that's a useful change to the zoning bylaw. It's unfortunate that it didn't happen earlier, but I think ultimately that's not a bad thing to do.
Thank you.
Tim Litt, Woodland Road, not an attorney, don't play one on TV, but I did read and look at this. A couple of points following up on some of the discussion here. The first is my reading of this is that it would allow you to have a building which is only residential dwelling units in the business village district by right, as long as it's under 2,000 square feet. That may be a good thing, it may be a bad thing, but it's not clear that the proponents understand that. The second thing, along the lines of Mr. Morris's comments, is that this does have a ripple effect further into the definitions of 174.84. Because if you look at section C, as Mr. Morris pointed out, it allows all uses in B greater than 2,000 square feet by special permit. So as a practical matter, it seems to me that almost anything you'd want to do is going to be greater than 2,000 square feet, and that will trigger a special permit process for this. And the third observation I'll make is that the other thing that is likely to trigger a special permit for this is that you will want parking for more than 3 cars or more than 1 truck, and that also requires special permit in the business village district. So I'm not opposed to sort of the simple approach, but it's important that you understand the consequences. I think the outcome of this is that it really doesn't matter what you say in B, because you're going to end up requiring a special permit for one of those reasons.
Thank you.
Freddie Gillespie, 78 Southville Road. I want to state my support for going through the overlay district approach. Overlay, I don't think it's called district, but the overlay approach. I would disagree that this simple change, it's not small and it's not uncontroversial, and I think you have slim chance of passing at town meeting when you're impacting all the villages and allowing by right to some undetermined amount of apartments. You're talking redevelopment, tear down of homes. We have strict rules of how you put apartments in these districts with adaptive reuse and historic preservation, with historic preservation or affordable housing. And this throws all of that out the window. People worked really hard on the adaptive reuse bylaw, and now, oh, I can just turn my house into an apartment building. Nothing there that says you are doing any businesses. So that is across the board in all of the village business districts, and I can guarantee that would be well commented on at town meeting, because it's one of the things that got a lot of pushback at this during the ZAC process. What are you doing to these neighborhoods? We do not, whether you want businesses with apartments above is one thing, but people have, and that's a concept that seems to be, gaining favor, but people have pushed back against, just by right, apartments, whether they're condos or not, multi-use family, multi-residence, and that opens this up. It says nothing about having mixed use. And if you want it to be mixed use, you need to have an overlay district. You can put it specific to one village. You can put it specific to a section of a village. I don't know how clear it is for not becoming spot zoning, but you can do that and work where you have support. And even though it might take more work to draft it, you're going to have a better product that has much more likelihood of passing town meeting with everyone's support. The other issue is zoning's complicated. So residential use in the village business district must comply with the residential RB district standards. This is residential use. So now how are you going to say, can't say residential dwelling units and apartments. I think everyone's going to agree that is a residential use. So now you have a front 30-foot, rear 35-foot, side 15-foot, and other street 30 feet for a building that you want businesses on the lower level and apartments upstairs. You're not going to find lots that are going to have the businesses and the parking that are going to meet those standards easily. Because I know it won't fit the one most people have been looking at recently. I don't want to mention it because it's a project, but so how are you going to do that? Now you're going to have to go in and sort of cobble together something different for, well, a residential dwelling unit, if it's an apartment, has a different standard of setbacks. I think I Googled and looked for, mixed-use village, not village, mixed-use apartment dwelling, whatever I used for a combo. I came up with great bylaws. I think they're out there. I think you can find one that's similar to what our town wants and just customize it, and it would be much better addressing all the issues that aren't going to come up and someone's going to raise them at town meeting and say, what about this? This isn't, I don't even know that I've caught them all, but certainly the setbacks is an issue. Certainly by right apartment buildings in all the villages, you're not preventing that. This does not say, yes, it allows you to have apartments above a business, but it also allows you to have apartment buildings. Some level.
What if, just throwing this out there, what if we changed it to residential dwelling units as part of a mixed-use development?
That's not I'm not sure. You need an attorney to review that, maybe. But now you're starting to, so now you see where you're going. And then what are you going to do about the residential setbacks? What are the setbacks for this kind of a building? What other constraints are you not?
Specify there are none.
And what's the parking? How many garages, how many spaces or garage per residential unit? 0, because they're walking? I'm just saying there's so much that you're going to get better guidance by looking at an overlay district, that this one line does not fix what you want to fix. So now you're already, just tonight, we're adding this, and I'm saying you have to look to this area. Now you got to look to the definitions. Doesn't it seem that maybe one overlay district might put it all together, one place, simpler than telling people at town meeting, well, this section here we're changing, and this section here, and then people don't understand, and they start to, I think you have a lot of support.
Well, that's why we're trying to keep it as simple as possible, and I appreciate you're bringing up these issues that certainly would have to be addressed. So, we'll continue to work on that. I don't think it's correct that this wouldn't have support at town meeting.
I'm not saying it wouldn't have support. I'm saying I can guarantee you it will have against it as well, enough.
That's fine. What doesn't?
3/4 vote is a lot to get.
I know, I was worried that we weren't gonna get it with public safety, so thank you.
So I'm just saying that, I know this was an issue about apartments last time around. And, if you think that, if the same people who would fight that are not the same people who are supporting mixed use downtown. So it's just a different battle. You're not necessarily aware of what level of pushback could cause.
Thank you.
Anyone else? How do we want to go from here?
Looks like I'm gonna be working with Ms. Luttrell. We'll have to meet, when we have our next meeting, we'll have to, what was that?
I said you're here too.
Yeah. I don't know who our representative will be because we do not have a quorum, so we can't take a vote on it as of right now.
Mrs. Luttrell, did you officially volunteer to help with this?
She's been voluntold.
I think you officially volunteered me.
Mr. Mills.
I make a motion that we have Ms. Luttrell be our representative to the EDC proposed zoning amendment.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. No discussion. All in favor? Thanks a lot, Mimi.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your input.
We'll get back with our name.
Sure. Through the town planner.
No, I don't want to make her work too hard.
I'm sorry.
Right, exactly.
Did you say you'll do what?
You gotta-
I'll get back to you or the board as to, we'll get back as to who gets the lucky shot straw. to work on this.
Thank you very much for speaking with us tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is other business properly before the board, planners report. Karina.
Okay, for the planners report, first thing, I just wanted to update you on the Mooney and Neary Field lighting projects that were submitted for major site plan approval applications. They've taken back their applications for now. There were a couple deficiencies, specifically the site plan needed to be stamped by a PE and prepared, and so that it's safe and all the regular things that every applicant has to go through. So they're, DPW is going back to talk to Recreation about that. And I'm hoping to hear back from them soon. I wanted to confirm that, yeah?
So they're coming back?
No, they've taken their applications back. So that was never, their applications weren't complete, so I didn't accept them.
Right.
So they came and picked up the packages so they don't have to redo
But
things.
the intention is that they will resubmit?
That's unsure. My impression was that DPW is going to talk to Recreation and then get back to me.
Because it was discussed in length at town meeting that they would come before the planning board for site plan. And I think it would be disingenuous if they, after they got their funding approved at town meeting, then decided they didn't need to come before the planning board for site plan after they promised the legislative body that they would.
Right, and they submitted for major site plan application and were going to either be exempt or waived from the lid, depending on what we figure out. So there were some items in it's the site plan. They have electrical schematic, but we need an official site plan. So if they can just get past that, then the other things were minor. So, but they did apply. Now, what they're gonna reapply with, I can't say, but other people have mentioned that as well to me, that it was part of the approval at town meeting. So hopefully they're aware of that. Anything else on that one?
Did you have something on that item?
Yes, I believe that the project was approved with site plan approval for the CPA funding. So that's another issue of concern. You know, we were told certain things would happen for the project when we did the approval, so it's not just town meeting. I believe it wouldn't have gotten on town meeting floor without the CPC putting it there. So, something we're going to stay on top of.
Okay, good. Everyone's aware you have a town email now. I've been using your old email still until I'm confirmed you want to all use the new one.
You can change mine to the fancy new town one.
Okay. Anybody else have any specific instructions, or you want me to continue as is? Okay. Recently, Cornerstone, in regards to Chestnut Meadow subdivision, was asking me about changing what it might require to change the open space lots from lots 5 and 6, which was approved as part of the subdivision, to lots 2 and 3. So My guess is it would be a modification to a definitive subdivision, but I asked for the basis of their request, and I think they're busy with some other things, so it's kind of on hold. But I just wanted to let you know that was a question out there. I emailed everyone a process on the townhouse door securing. Everybody get that? I didn't realize you had to put the automatic button on the door, you know, the automatic door opener on and off, so I'll do that now. Last week, I attended a 5G Verizon workshop on small cells, and it was very interesting. I had sent the email to various groups, the town administrator, the municipal technology committee. There were quite a few other towns there, and it was very informative. It's also amazing what they're going to do with this, in my opinion. So I had several questions I asked based on the different sides of the story. And there was a contact I made there, and I gave that information to Mark Purple, someone who was informed about various town bylaws and the FCC regulation and when that takes effect, and he was very knowledgeable on it. So I passed that on, because Mark's spearheading that with the Municipal Technology Committee. All right, Public Works Planning Board, Jamie Heller submitted his resignation. So that's 2 people. They're down, so I think they have 3 people now. So if anybody's interested in, if you know of anybody who wants to be on that committee, let them know.
I received an email from Mr. Stivers indicating that he was interested in being appointed as the planning board, one of the planning board appointees to that planning, to the
Public
DPW
Works.
planning. Yeah,
Yeah.
Public Works.
Planning Department,
So,
Planning Committee, Board.
yeah. So, I guess, I haven't talked to Sam about it, but he did send me an email and indicated he was interested. Do you, oh, I didn't see you over there, Sam. I thought you left.
I received one as well.
So if the board wants to discuss this now, discuss it at our next meeting, it's up to you. I'm prepared to discuss it now.
Well, I'd be curious, when did they resign? I mean, not that I'm opposed to Mr. Stivers, but if there was other interest
Oh,
too, I'd just
I'm
like to
sorry.
give people that aren't as on top of changes in town politics an opportunity to submit their interest as well. And hopefully this might spark some, since it sounds like there's some, couple of open seats, so.
Would you like me to read the letter?
No, I'm just wondering when the letter was submitted.
So, I received an email today, October 29th, but the letter to Don Morris, Chair of the Planning Board, October 27th, 2018,
So
with
2
his
days ago.
intention to resign from the seat held at the Public Works Planning Board effective October 29th. His term was expiring June 30th, 2020. The board will now have 2 vacancies out of 5 seats. And he thanked everybody and appreciated the support while he was on the committee.
So, I mean, since it's only been 2 days, and while I know Mr. Stivers, I'm sure is fully qualified.
Quick comment, the other empty seat is appointed by the moderator. So there's 1 seat empty for the moderator, 1 seat empty for the planning board now. Just point of information.
So, just to be fair to others, if there were others interested, since it's only been announced for 2 days, I think it's only fair if we advertise it a little bit and vote next time, personally.
Usually I would agree with you, Mr. Mills, except for the position that's vacant, appointed by the moderator, has been vacant for some time. So if somebody hears about this now and wants to put their name in the ring, there's still another vacancy. And I would support Mr. Stivers.
So we'll wait. We'll let the town planner huddle with the rest, with maybe the moderator and others in the town hall, and then try to solicit some interest, and then we'll just put it on our next agenda. Okay.
Is that the last item?
Yes, that's it.
Make a motion, we approve the minutes from October 2nd, 2018.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? 3-0 to 0.
3?
Yep. Lisa, good evening.
Good evening. If I could just have 20 seconds of the board's attention before you adjourn, that would be appreciated.
You're on.
Is this my 20 seconds?
No, you've got you keep it
25. Well, I just wanted to, seeing as I'm here, the board may have or is going to be getting a invitation to a Selectmen Volunteer Appreciation Breakfast on the 8th between 7 and 8:30, very informal. Just stop in on your way to work, come have a nice breakfast, give the Selectmen an opportunity to thank you. That's all for all of the volunteer boards. So obviously, you've already gotten your invitation, so I guess it was a moot point, but I would hope that you would come and give us the opportunity to thank you for all that you do for the town. So that's all. 25 seconds.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming to our meeting. Mr. Mills.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? We're adjourned.